What inspired you to start speaking out more about political issues, about what's happening in the politicization of comics, and how has the people you've grown up with and your family and your friends reacted to your political perspective?
Yeah. So for me, when I found out that I had been duped and I was basically believing in political views that I really didn't understand, it was more of just it's embedded in who you're, what this is what you're supposed to support if you are going to be involved politically. And once I found out, like again, I told you about read about the likes of like the Walter Williams and Dr. Thomas Sowell, and understanding like these different concepts that I hadn't even entertained before, it changed. So I was angry, to be completely honest. Like, I spent I was young, but I spent better part of my life living a lie, you know what I mean, or being duped and just going along with the charade that is leftism. So I was angry, and considering that I had been duped, I wanted to speak out against some of those even abhorrent views that I had before, because I knew there were other people, definitely young people, that were in la la land as well. So I was, you can imagine just believing something, finding out it's false, being angry, and then just trying to use that at least for some sort of good. I was always a decent speaker. I was always able to conceptualize these different points it is that I had. I mean, I did it through music for a long time. And now it was more of doing it like publicly in like maybe the political arena, or doing it on even videos and stuff like that. I figured that that was sort of my calling. And I was able to use even other stuff like my music. Definitely people that remember me and Fire from the Gods, where we had these different songs that were like called The Capitalist. And people didn't understand it back then, you know what I mean, what it was. But I was, writing music that would were my essentially my views. And definitely growing up as growing up. And when I say growing up, I'm an adult at this point, but becoming more knowledgeable on these various different concepts and having the opportunity to speak in front of people, it changed everything. Because here we are now, because people apparently wanted to hear. I think one of the big subject matters for me was minimum wage, where I would talk about that all the time, and even how that impacted a lot of the communities that I was in. And that turned into one thing. I remember doing Fox and Friends back when Tucker Carlson was there, way back in the Gap, and appearing on there talking minimum wage and doing stuff like that. So that political growth happened at going into 19 years old, 20, 21. And like I said, it was a slow. It was economics was the subject that did it for me. And then it went, it's like you go learn about this economic stuff, learn about Sowell, you learn about Chicago economists and Milton Friedman's of the world, and then you learn more about these more free marketed economics. And then I went full Austrian, and stumbled across the likes of freaking Murray Rothbard and Mises, and it changed everything. No turning back from there.
As far as all the content that you produce, what is the most popular?
Man, that's a good question. I mean, it's easy for me to say now, I guess the comic book stuff, right? But I can talk about a subject that is political, and I can get, people love to hear me talk about that sort of stuff, or social. So it's hard to gauge, you know what I mean, which one it is. I think maybe those are equal, and maybe secondary would be the music stuff, definitely the metal stuff. Though I get asked every day, when's Backwards' new album gonna drop? When is all this stuff? So we're working on that. But it would have to be between the political stuff and like the comic book stuff, because I can talk about either of those, and people seem to really, really, really dig it. And then oftentimes some of those audiences blend as well. You got some of the same people that are there, so it depends on what. I guess that's a good problem to have, because it's like I get to wake up and just be like, I want to talk about whatever the fuck I want to talk about, and there's an audience for it. So I guess it works out.
Not the metaphysical question, but like the sociological question, whatever. As you've come out politically, have you made enemies with people that you did not think you were going to make enemies with, or have you found yourself being thrown under the bus by people who hitherto, up until then, thought you were an ally?
Well, certainly musically, yeah. I would say that there's a sense of you're not supposed to be here. So to give people a backstory, like, my main genre, if there is, I know we do a lot of genre blending. But in music, it was metalcore, which is obviously the genre mixture of metal and hardcore music, which came from more so punk stuff. And pretty much everybody is a leftist outside of my good friend Phil from All That Remains, Phil Labonte. It's just us. Maybe you can throw in Ryan Kirby from Fit for a King, good friend of mine as well, who's libertarian. But we're like, they don't like us, right? And I remember getting hit pieces wrote about me by these like little corny little metal magazines and stuff. And, you know, because I think differently than they are, because the idea is that you're not supposed to be there, right? Like you're definitely, if you're seeing success, like they think that leftism is positive. And definitely I remember back definitely when Bernie Sanders was running in like the mid 2010s, and everybody, all these idiot leftists running little Bernie bro shirts and all that, doing the shows and stuff. And I was the guy that would follow their act and say fuck the guy on stage and wouldn't give a shit. And, you know, they didn't like it. Let's say that they didn't like it. We were undeniable in the sense that we obviously had the following, but they didn't like us, and we felt that. And it comes with its set of issues. I think now a lot has changed technologically, but you can imagine if we depended on these guys to get on shows and stuff. I remember there was one massive tour. I think people can put two and two together who it is. But there was a massive tour that is no longer around that we were supposed to do. And the actual founder of this tour found out my position on Planned Parenthood, and obviously wanting to defund them and all of that. And that in itself made them not want to include us on this said tour. And ironically enough, Planned Parenthood would be showing up at various events with handing out pamphlets and all sorts of random stuff at this said tour as well. But you also have to be prepared for that sort of stuff. At least back then you did. I think now the internet, people are realizing more than ever, like the proper channels aren't really proper anymore. We can do whatever the hell we want. But back then it was like a way to do things. And yeah, you're going to get undercut for a lot of different things if you're among their ranks in entertainment and they don't like you like that because they think that it belongs to them and they own it.
Are you surprised that, you know, artists are supposed to be or seen as the independent creative voice, but they've increasingly become the symbolic, this voice of the state, the voice of the system? I mean, Rage Against the Machine really has to be renamed Rage for the Machine.
Yes, for sure.
You know, many of these illustrations of these fight the man, endorse the man, you know, support mass house arrest, support mass vaccination, support indoctrination of their children, support whatever the latest notion is on gender relationships or gender identity, or even go around talking about, you know, redefine pedophilia as minor attracted people. Are you struck by the fact that these independent, creative, artistic minds have become such sort of statist shills?
Yeah, and again, my first big introduction to that was the whole Bernie situation and seeing these like, you know, to your point, fist in the air, fight the man, you know, fight the corporate entities and all that. Capitalism is something they blend all that together, wrongfully defining it or whatever. Maybe I guess they own the etymology, but whatever. Like, you find out very quick how pro-government they were when, again, like a guy like Bernie Sanders had run. And I watched all of these people who were like, oh, the establishment is so bad, we're absolutely shilling for it. And then it became, with COVID, to your point, it was unlike anything that I'd seen, because you had like en masse these people who acted as if the pharmaceutical companies were the most evil folks in the world, turned around and like that were actively shilling for it, wanting to punish you for not wanting to get the jab. They were having these ridiculous rules, all fight the man, but, you know, make sure you won't be allowed at our show if you don't show proof of vaccination. Like, what the fuck? Like, none of you guys are actually anti-government. It's like, it's edgy teenager stuff was what you find. It's like a cool thing, fight the powers that be situation, where people are like, it's cool to be an activist, it's cool to do the music videos, fist in the air and do all this stuff, but ultimately you are pro-government fucking heck, is what these guys are. And yeah, some of these bands that, you know, built their platforms. You brought up Rage and some of these other guys that built platforms on acting like they were against the grain, and they all own it's. They just want their guy in charge is essentially what it all amounts to. They are as status as it can get.
I'm going to bring up something. It's going to be very embarrassing for me if I can find. Oh, here it is. Yes, Eric, if you can believe, this is me right here in that picture. I can't bring up the picture. That was once upon a time. Oh, geez, how do I get this out of here? That was once upon a time when I liked Bernie. This was pre-2016 because he espoused the same beliefs as the Trump. And I love some people go back and find pictures and think they've owned you because they found a picture.
Yeah, it's like me with an Obama shirt. Yeah, you'll find some of those. They exist. They absolutely exist.
Once upon a time, the people you found out were frauds said things that you actually believed, Bernie being one of them, before he bent over and endorsed the person who stuck it to him, proverbially speaking. And the people who shilled out, I can't even pull up the tweet from Pink endorsing Pfizer. Questlove endorsing Pfizer. Michael Phelps endorsing Pfizer. I mean, what are you a religious man, Eric?
Yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah,
okay. What do you attribute it to other than the biblical verse? What good is all the riches of the earth for he who has forsaken his soul?
Yeah.
What do you chalk it up to? How do people flip the switch, go from being rage against the machine to rage for the machine? Pink, I don't know whatever her songs were, to endorsing big pharma. How do you account for this political shift seismic shift in geology?
Man, it's such a hard thing to pin it on, but I think that you had definitely, as of recent, with the just growth of something like simple as social media, I think what people did and what they found out is that they could present themselves as good people without having to do a whole lot of work. Right. And I think that became so attractive to these people, and they became addicted to, let's say, the attention of, look at me, I'm a good person. My morals are, or I have a good set of morals or whatever. And we, of course, argue that they certainly don't there, but it made it easy for them to do it. I always like joke about how like activism is the occupation of losers. And this is why you often see these people, you know, with like more, it requires nothing of you to go walk in a line or something like that in March, or there's no real change that's involved in any of that stuff, much like it's not endorsing these other folks like Pfizer, because their whole situation or their whole angle is that they're thinking like, well, if people get the, you know, yeah, they were sold on a lie on the whole jab and what it actually did, and you know, it preventing transmission and all that, and that was bullshit, and we knew it was from the get-go, but that didn't stop them from acting as if that was the case. But you think about how they were separating regular individuals from, you know, it wasn't even political at that point. Or I guess it was technically, because they thought they could punish their political enemies because of it. But it became something as simple as being like pro-jab mandate versus folks that aren't for that. And they looked at it like, we're saving people's lives here by, I don't know, enriching these fucking pharmaceutical companies who have a long history of doing very criminal things. But it was an easy way out for them. And I think that's the dangerous part of the social media era that we're living in as it continues to grow, is that people are addicted to being presented or presenting themselves as good people, and they would do disgusting things because of it, even if it means contradicting themselves from last week. I mean, we saw it through I think people lose sight of what happened in 2020 when you had the whole COVID situation pop off, but then the George Floyd situation popped off during that. And the same people that were insisting that you needed to be locked in your house went themselves and were in these large groups with other people when they were at this, like, I mean, it wasn't even a week. I'm talking like 12 hours ago, they were just saying that if you did that, it was criminal of you to do that. And then they not only did it, they somehow got the medical community to say that it was okay for them to do it. Like I don't know if you guys remember seeing clips of like nurses outside of the hospitals cheering these guys on as they march in these massive groups. And I'm like, did y'all not forget what y'all had just told us? But that's the thing. And I think That's the difficult thing about folks that value liberty, because we're faced up against a threat that doesn't, of course, abide by our set of morals and ethics, and consistency doesn't even matter to them. Well, that's something that, you know, we can sit up there and say you're hypocritical, and we'll take offense to that. They look at that like, okay, right, I got what it is that I want. It doesn't matter. Sure, I contradicted myself from yesterday, but we're going to move on, and I'm going to punish you. It's very difficult to fight an enemy like that.